the ACE study. And I had no idea at the time, as odd as I was by what Dr. Felitti had to say, I had absolutely no idea how much that talk and subsequent association with this and with the ACE work would affect my professional life. It's probably one of the most important pieces of work that will play on forever and ever and affect the work that we all do. And I'm very happy to say that being able to work with Vince and Rob Anda over the years has been a great pleasure. Vince and I are one of my good friends, and we occasionally run into each other in airports, and one of those being yesterday, but that was planned. We had a very nice time. I'm not going to take up Vince's time to introduce him other than to tell you that he trained at Johns Hopkins, both at medical school and residency, became an internist, went to Kaiser Permanente in California, and that's one of the things about this. He thinks outside the box that most of us are banging our thoughts around. This takes a step further and says, how can I create data that will allow us to do some future work? So the case study is, I hope everybody is at least moderately aware of, will be much more aware of than after this talk, is not only affecting my life and your life, but one of the things that I'm seeing now is I go across the country talking about toxic stress and ACE studies. Most everybody now has heard about it. Most people haven't quite heard enough about it yet, so it's really nice to be able to talk about it. And every time I have an opportunity and get to hear Dr. Felitti, then I get to add several things to my slide collection, and I take full credit for those. This is a terrific thing. He is always trying to share some of those thoughts today. He's always trying to look at, talking about shifting paradigms, about how to shift paradigms to educate people around subjects that are difficult to educate people about. And I'm very grateful to him for the work that he has written about in 80-some-odd articles, the talks that he's given, many of which now I think will be here. And can I do the ACES thing now? Up here for you to grab at the end is a flyer about the ACE study and a DVD that talks about ACEs informing best practices. This is an online, collaborative, living, learning document that's hosted by the Academy on Violence and Abuse. Full disclosure, I'm a past president of the Academy on Violence and Abuse and still on the board. Our goal is to try and insert more education around health issues, including violence and abuse, into the curriculum for health professionals, nurses and PAs, and doctors, and dentists, and psychologists, social workers, and whatever. Because we noticed some years ago that although we were recognizing people who had conditions that we knew how to trace back to adversity, most of the other people that were taking care of them didn't know how to do that. You're welcome to pick these up. This online document is available on the web. It's free. You can go in, you can add comments. We would ask people to join the Academy on Violence and Abuse, and there's information about how to do that on the website as well. We're very, very pleased that Academy, that Dr. Felitti has been a major influence in the work that we do, and he's going to be a major influence from this moment on in the work that we do. Dr. Felitti.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me adequately in the back and clearly? Okay. There's a question that's implicit in the opening slide. These were pictures taken both in downtown San Diego. And that question is, if someone gave you this newborn infant with its extraordinary potential and said you had 20 years to develop it into this person lying unconscious on the sidewalk, overlooked by a world that is frightened of such things, what would you have to do? How would you do that? That's what the ACE study is about. The answer to that question relates directly and in unexpected ways to difficult problems in medical practice, in social functioning, in institutionalization, in addiction, and in public health that we face both as physicians and as citizens. The ACE study is about what we learned exploring the origins of these problems and how what we came to see was an interesting public health paradox, wherein what we perceived as some of our major public health problems often turn out to be unconsciously attempted solutions on the part of the individual involved, solutions to problems that we know nothing about. And so we end up treating somebody's solution, and maybe that has something to do with why some of our public health problems are so difficult. The implications, obviously, for prevention and treatment are major. And so, too, has been the resistance to using this information clinically. Everyone wants to hear about it, but using it clinically has been resisted on a very high level. Maybe that will change here. Let me tell you what we learned from the ACE study, and then I'll show you the evidence for that. The 10 categories of adverse childhood experience that we studied are very common and very disturbing, and hence are mostly unrecognized. They turn out to be powerful predictors of adult social malfunctioning, well-being, health risks, biomedical disease, and premature death. And that combination of high prevalence and great penetrance makes adverse childhood experiences the leading determinant of the health and social well-being and the economy of the nation. Well, that's a pretty big flat-footed statement to make. I have no compunction making it, and you will see why. In a very real way, the study began in 1985. I had a department of preventive medicine I was running, and we had a major obesity program there using the technique of supplemented absolute fasting, which allows one to take a person's weight down about 300 pounds in a year non-surgically. And we were doing that. This woman came in, she was 28 years old, she was a nurse's aide on the night shift in a convalescent hospital, all of which meant something, but we didn't know that. And she asked if we could help her with her problem. Our first mistake was in accepting her diagnosis of what the problem was. You look at these pictures and ask yourself the question, which photo depicts the patient's problem? Basically, I expect you will largely be wrong. Years after the fact, we found this photo of her at age 8. Kind of forces yourself to ask, well, I mean, what happened between here and here? Otherwise, you can take the easy out. Well, I mean, that's the way some people are. They're born that way. You know, God just made them that way, etc. She helped us see that, as is the case with smoke and fire, what is most obvious in a house burning down is not necessarily the essence of the problem. Now, a house is burning down, typically you see the smoke billowing out. And you just thank God the fire departments understand that the smoke is not what's to be treated, even though it's the most obvious thing. Otherwise, homes would be treated, house fires would be treated by bringing large fans that blow the smoke away, etc. except the house would burn down fire faster. Pretty soon, homeowners would flee the treatment. As is commonly the case in obesity programs, addiction programs, alcoholism programs, etc. So, using this technique of supplemented absolute fasting, we took her weight from 408 to 132 pounds in 51 weeks, and thought, well, we took the proper weight. We're going to have a world-famous Department of Preventive Medicine here. She was a memorable teacher. Here is her weight curve. Looks kind of like an Olympic ski jump. She stays down here for a couple of weeks, and then, in one 3-week period, does something I had not conceived as being physiologically possible. She regains 37 pounds in 3 weeks, and in short order is back over 400 pounds, faster than she had lost the weight, and disappears for 12 years. And I remember asking her at this point, what's going on? She said, I think I'm sleep eating. What do you mean? Well, when I was a kid, I used to be a sleepwalker. I haven't done that for years because I live alone, and when I go to bed, everything's clean and put away in the kitchen. Wake up in the morning, boxes and cans are open, pots and dishes are dirty. Somebody's obviously been cooking and eating there. I'm the only person there putting on weight, but I have no recollection of any of this. Okay, I've never heard of it before, but it's got a certain force of logic to it. But why now? Why not 5 years ago? Why not 3 years from now? Why now? Really important question. I don't know. So what do you think? I don't know. I understand. But why do you think it's happening now? I don't know. Yeah, you said that. And on the third pass, she stumbled and said, well, actually, there was this man at work. He was a much older man, you understand. And he was married. And he said to me, hey, you look pretty good. You lost all that weight, Patty. How about you and me making it every week? And that was the day that sleep eating began. And I remember thinking, well, pretty gross proposition, but this is 1986. It is Southern California. It's kind of an extreme response. Why the extreme response? And pursuing that led to a lengthy incest history with her grandfather. I had previously assumed incest was pretty rare. About 10 days later, I stumbled into a somewhat similar case. Soon started inquiring routinely in the obesity program about childhood sexual abuse. And I was incredulous. It seemed that every other person I was asking was acknowledging such a history. And I remember thinking, this can't be true. People would know if this were true. Somebody would have told me. Wasn't that what medical school was for? 186 cases later, I was pretty convinced this was real. But still, maybe I'm doing something I don't understand. I got 5 other colleagues to interview the next 100 patients coming in who turned up the same thing. At which point I was convinced this was real, it's just nobody wanted to know. Presented this at a national obesity conference in Atlanta in 1990. It was wildly attacked by the audience. Some guy got up and under the guise of asking a question made the pronouncement that you really need to understand, Dr. Felitti, that people who are more familiar with these matters, like obviously they, recognize these statements by patients are largely fabrications to provide a covered explanation for failed lives. Okay, yeah, right, of course. We understand that, people falsely claim incest histories for social aggrandizement. There was a dinner meeting for speakers afterwards, and seated next to me was someone from the CDC. And this doctor said, well, look, if what what you're saying is true. It's of enormous importance to the country as well as the practice of medicine, but nobody's going to believe your 286 cases, no matter how well you study them. What we need is a large epidemiologically sound study with thousands of people in it, and from a general population, not some, group we collected somehow. Okay, yeah, we could do that. I have this unusual setting back home where the health appraisal division of the department provided to 58,000, will provide a comprehensive medical evaluation to 58,000 results a year. This was a very unusual kind of setting. Now, you could buy the same service at the Mayo Clinic for $2,000 with dozens of covered benefits. You wanted 58,000 people a year came through. So after battling with the IRB for a couple of years, or for 9 months actually, the IRB turned down our initial proposal, insisting that we could not ask patients questions we were proposing because you're going to cause people to be compensated. You may make occasional patients suicidal by asking them these terrible questions about their childhood, etc. Finally got them to agree, and this is the structure of the ACE study. We asked 26,000 adults coming through for comprehensive medical evaluation if they would help us in the study. 70%, 17,500 agreed to help us. And we matched current health status here at average age 57 against 10 categories of adverse childhood experiences from birth to age 18. Well, we're looking roughly a half century back on average. Average age 57, almost exactly half men, half women. 80% white, including Hispanic, 10% black, 10% Asian. 74% had been to college. Everybody had high-end medical insurance. And this was incontestably a clearly middle-class population. And then we have been following them forward for the past 20 years, matching what happened here now 60, 70 years ago against current pharmacy costs, emergency room visits, doctor office visits, hospitalization, and death. That's the basic structure of the ACE study. We were dealing with enormous amounts of data. The 10 categories that we studied were selected empirically because they were so common in the obesity program. All of this, of course, was totally a surprise. Major emotional abuse, basically recurrent humiliation. You are the stupidest kid I've ever seen. Or as a man in Texas told me a couple of months ago, his father used to line the kids up and tell them, you kids ought to just be taken outside and shot. That was acknowledged by 11% of the group. Heavy-duty physical abuse, I don't mean spanking, I'm talking serious beating of fists, sticks, branches, and stuff like that. Acknowledged by 28%. Contact sexual abuse, oral, anal, or vaginal, contact sexual abuse, acknowledged by 28% of the women and 16% of the men in this general population. Major emotional neglect, 15%, major physical neglect, 10%, growing up in a home where one of the members of your household was an alcoholic or a drug user, 27%, losing a biological parent for any reason before the age of 18, 23%. That was interesting because the most benign way of losing a parent was death, as long as that death was not by suicide. The most destructive, really irretrievable blow was maternal abandonment. Mom left when we were 3. Most common, obviously, was divorce. A huge issue in childhood onset obesity, which is overwhelmingly unrecognized. Growing up in a home where one of the members of your household was chronically depressed, suicidal, mentally ill, or in a state hospital, 17%. Where mother was treated violently, 13%. Where one of the members of your household was in prison, 5%. I mean, all of this was massively unexpected, but of course, to find out, you have to ask everyone routinely. None of us would ever do that. Because my colleagues assured me, oh my God, you're crazy. You can't ask patients questions like that. Why don't you furious and no one will tell you the truth anyway? I mean, this struck me as really pretty improbable, and then I remembered that I knew 2 physicians, one of whom was a national figure, who had sons in the state penitentiary. Now, they didn't speak about that, so most people didn't know that. But, you know, it was an impressive recollection. Importantly, the way one collects this information is critical. To do it face to face is doomed. I've had many colleagues try approaches like telling a patient, I want you to understand, I ask all my patients these questions. You're not having anything going wrong at home now, are you? You can have anything bad happen to you as well. I mean, you know, pretty quickly the patient gets, if this guy is so uncomfortable talking about it, you can come up and talk with him about it. We used a well-devised 10-page questionnaire that had these questions integrated into it, filled out at home, not on some wretched clipboard in the doctor's waiting room. And what we learned by doing that with 17,500 people was really extraordinary. The people were willing to share. That had to be followed up in the exam room. And the most common approach that the examiners used was, I see on the questionnaire that. And tell me how that's affected you later in your life. And they listened. And implicitly accepted. Period. I see on the questionnaire that you were the one who discovered your father's body when he hanged himself. Can you tell me how that's affected you later in your life? I see on the questionnaire that you were frequently beaten as a kid or molested. Can you tell me how that's affected you later in your life? And we listened. Period. And implicitly accepted. And that was a critical piece, although it took a while to understand the importance of that. So we were dealing with mountains of information. We needed some way of simplifying things, and we created an ACE score, which summed the number of categories of adverse childhood experience, not incidents or events, but categories. 33% acknowledged none of the 10 categories. 11%, 1 in 9 people, acknowledged 5 or more of the categories. From a physician's standpoint, that means that every doctor in the country is seeing 2, maybe 3, case 4 or 5 or higher patients every day. They will, of course, be unrecognized. They will also be the most difficult and intractable cases of the day. We found that, as you can see here, 67% acknowledged 1 or more categories. That if any category was present, there was an 87% chance that at least one other category was present. I mean, you don't grow up in a house where your brother's in prison, but everything else is terrific. And a 50% chance that 3 or more categories would be present. And that women were 50% more likely than men to have an ACE score of 5 or more, which has everything to do with conditions like fibromyalgia, pelvic pain, etc. So what does this look like in the office? Well, this is an interesting map. It was a very bright guy. In a very real way, an amateur psychopharmacologist. Equally a semi-pro saloon fighter. In a different era, this guy might have been a cowboy. Today, he may be working on an oil rig or some isolated line of work that keeps him away from home, which clearly is an unsafe place. When he was 3, his mother and father divorced. He never saw his father again. Mother remarried at 5 for whatever reason. His stepfather saw fit to beat him pretty much every day. When he was 8, he tells me he remembers walking to school one morning and the thought crosses his mind, nobody is ever going to be there for me in my life. When he's 20, a big, strong young man, he comes home one day, finds his stepfather beating his mother. He takes a heavy iron frying pan and impressively induces 5 long bone fractures and 1 skull fracture in his stepfather, for which he is imprisoned in Rhode Island for attempted murder. Ultimately, he gets out, becomes a good citizen, very responsibly sends his significant paychecks home to his 3rd wife, a nurse who believes in him, but he works far from home most of the year. Listen to what he has to say. He is a 3-pack-a-day smoker, an alcoholic, and a very heavy drug user, particularly crystal meth. Listen to what he has to say about the functional role of 3 addictive substances that we typically misidentify as dysfunctional.
20, 25 years drowning out some poor childhood experiences with drugs, alcohol, cigarettes. Got rid of the drugs, got rid of the alcohol. Next thing I'm going to get rid of is the cigarettes. And I had no idea that it played such an important part in keeping that door closed.
In keeping the door closed too.
The memories that I've blocked out with all these years with the alcohol and the drugs.
So you see what's happened to you now as related to what happened to you decades ago?
Yep. I probably blocked the emotions and the memories.
With
Drugs, alcohol, cigarettes.
So that's their functionality. And we dismiss them as dysfunctional. Addiction is properly defined as the unconscious, compulsive use of psychoactive materials. In plain talk, it's hard to get enough of something that almost works. Maybe the next cigarette will do it, or the next drink, or the next mouthful, or the next woman, or the next dose of whatever I'm buying on the street. And if not, well, probably the dose after that. Addiction, conventionally, is believed due to characteristics that are intrinsic in the molecular structure of some substance. I used to believe that. You take heroin enough times and supposedly you can't stop. What we found was quite different, that addiction highly correlates with characteristics intrinsic to that individual's childhood experiences. And the strength of this relationship is extraordinary, and the implications for prevention and treatment programs are profound. 2 studies are important to know about. A woman named Lee Robbins, in the closing years of the Vietnam War, did a very important study on heroin addiction in Vietnam. She got almost 1,000 American soldiers to acknowledge to her, but not to the Army, that they had used heroin daily for at least the antecedent 30 days. By anyone's criteria, hardcore done. Upon return to the United States with no treatment, when she interviewed them 8 months later, 94% of them are no longer using heroin. That was kind of a staggering surprise. The question that raised in my mind was, well, what made the difference between them and the 6% who weren't? Another important experiment. A man named Bruce Alexander up in British Columbia carried out something called the rat park experiment. He found that if you took rats, in a nice air-conditioned rat room, 3 square meals a day, and good light in their little cages, if you gave them a bottle of water with heroin, that they would select the water with heroin. He was a pretty insightful guy. It occurred to him that living in a little 6-by-8-inch cage by yourself was not a normal existence for a rat. And so he created what he called a rat park, a large outside enclosure filled with trash, rocks, dirt, and other stuff. Gave them the same 2 bottles of water, and amazingly, outside, the rats overwhelmingly selected the plain water. Oh, wow. Isn't that interesting? I mean, what we were terming intrinsic addiction, I mean, it's just sort of a functional approach to overwhelming experiences. We look at it in terms of smoking. I don't know what it's like here, but in San Diego it's very difficult to smoke. You can't smoke on a public beach, you can't smoke in a county park. And yet, there has been no decrease in smoking in about the past 12 years. And now people are vaping and going to electronic cigarettes and so forth. Well, it's because they've passed too many Marlboro billboards on the way to school with damage, tobacco companies and the kids that's happening. When we looked at current smokers in this hostile environment and matched it against underlying ACE score, oh wow, isn't that interesting? As the ACE score goes up, the likelihood of being a persistent smoker in the face of all of this public health opposition goes up, and a dose response manner. Isn't that interesting? The p-value of this, and every slide I show you will be 0.001 or better. We looked, and this is worth keeping in mind. The psychoactive benefits of nicotine have been known for about a century. There's potent anti-anxiety activity, potent antidepressant activity. The American Indians figured out empirically centuries ago anger suppressant activity. They were not burning oak leaves or moss in their ceremonial peace like this tobacco leaves. And appetite suppressant activity. Who doesn't know someone who quit smoking only to put on weight? Not only that, but those benefits occur within 15 or 20 seconds of inhalation. The risks are real and major. Look at 15 or 20 years of it. And if the screws are on tight enough, I think we all understand, give me that pack of smokes now. I'll worry about 20 years from now, next week, when things have calmed down. We looked at self-acknowledged alcoholism. The question we used was simple. Have you ever considered yourself to be an alcoholic? That's interesting. It's really pretty steep increase here. Sit down, have a drink, relax. Some people need a lot of relaxing. The benefits are, again, immediate when they're needed. The risks, which are very real, are in the future. We looked at IV drug use. This is an incomplete slide. because at age-score-6, it is so wildly off the scale that there's no way of fitting this all on one slide without massively distorting this. At age-score-6, for self-acknowledged injection drug use, at age-score-6, the likelihood of that individual becoming an IV drug user is 4,600% greater than is the likelihood for an age-score-0 individual. And I remember the epidemiologist at CDC told me that those are numbers of magnitude which they run into once in a career. Now, in the United States, and presumably here as well, the most common street drug is methamphetamine and crystal meth. Everyone probably knows that, but no one seems to recall that the first successful prescription antidepressant introduced for sale in the United States in 1940 by Barlow's Welcome and Company was methamphetamine. The very same chemical with an impure form of unknown dose is known on the street as crystal meth. Does it mean anything? This most commonly sold street drug is an effective, acknowledged potent antidepressant. Isn't it dangerous? Well, if you don't understand dosage, you take 30 antidepressants instead of 2, you just swallow a lethal dose, which would triple your digitalis dose, would be bad for you. Does it matter? Do you think we should focus on the underlying problem in addictions, or do we continue providing vacuous advice that what's being done is bad and dangerous? Shouldn't do that. To help fix this idea in your mind, here's a full-page advertisement from a 1943 issue of the Journal of the American Medical Association with a new, highly successful antidepressant, methamphetamine. Let's go back to obesity. This man became obese as a child after his parents divorced, and he was sent to live with his violent alcoholic grandfather. He vividly recalls eating for solace as an comfort food. And as he put on weight, he discovered that obesity offered advantages. And hear what he has to say in a moment. Now, we know that at some level. I think of our use of the term throwing the weight around. Although we blame McDonald's for why kids get fat, McDonald's is merely an intermediary mechanism that is used by some people. You mentioned power of the relationship of obesity to divorce. So, actually, in terms of understanding obesity,